Hello everyone, my name is Etienne, a German computer engineer who moved to Japan in 2010 for work. What I expected to learn in Japan involved
but not the strange relationship between people and space. Looking back today from Germany, one of the biggest lessons Japan taught me. At the time, I had already spent several weeks adapting to Tokyo's overwhelming pace and seemingly endless urban landscape. Every morning, I boarded crowded trains filled with thousands of people heading toward offices across the city. Every evening, I returned to a small apartment that felt increasingly difficult to live inside comfortably and peacefully. The apartment itself was modern, clean, and conveniently located near my workplace. Yet despite those advantages, something about the space constantly made me feel uncomfortable and slightly stressed. I never had to think carefully about where each possession belonged because space was rarely limited. Whenever I purchased something new,
in Tokyo, however, every square meter felt valuable enough to deserve careful planning and intentional daily use. During my first month, I kept convincing myself that I would eventually adjust to the limited space.
One rainy evening after work, I experienced a moment that completely captured my growing frustration with apartment life. As I stumbled forward, my shoulder hit a shelf containing books, manuals, and technical documents. Several books fell to the floor. I stood there silently while rain tapped against the window and traffic hummed outside in the darkness.
Then I said something aloud despite being completely alone inside the apartment that evening. This is impossible!
At that moment, I blamed the apartment for everything that seemed wrong with my daily life. I blamed Tokyo for
changes. Most importantly, I blamed the lack of physical space for the stress I felt each evening. What I didn't realize then...
A few months later, my colleague Tanaka invited me to dinner at his family's apartment one weekend. Tanaka worked with me on software development projects.
No matter how difficult a project became, he always seemed relaxed, focused, and remarkably organized throughout. He lived with his wife and their 10-year-old daughter. When he mentioned that his apartment was only slightly larger than mine, I became genuinely curious. To be honest, I was expecting complete chaos. After all, if I struggled alone, how could 3 people successfully share nearly the same amount of space?
I pictured overflowing shelves, crowded rooms, and exhausted parents constantly trying to control endless household.
The entrance immediately felt different from anything I had expected before arriving that afternoon.
Nothing seemed hidden, yet nothing appeared out of place anywhere throughout the visible area. As I stepped farther,
the apartment felt bigger than mine despite being almost exactly the same physical size. I know that sounds impossible, but that was honestly my...
Sunlight moved freely throughout the room without being blocked by unnecessary furniture or oversized decorations.
Instead of feeling crowded, the room felt calm, balanced, and strangely comfortable to spend time inside.
I looked around once more and asked the question that had been bothering me continuously. Where do you keep everything?
Tanaka laughed immediately, while Mrs. Tanaka smiled as though she had heard that question before.
Her answer became one of the most important lessons I learned during nearly 15 years living in Japan.
She explained that many Japanese homes are designed around space rather than around possessions themselves.
A chair, a shelf, a cabinet, a lamp, anything that prevents the area from appearing empty or incomplete to visiting guests.
Mrs. Tanaka gently explained that many Japanese people view empty space very differently from Western cultures.
The idea fascinated me because it challenged assumptions I had carried throughout most of my adult life. According to this,
instead, empty space creates balance, clarity, calmness, and room for both movement and thought.
Good software removes unnecessary complexity so users can focus entirely on what truly matters most. The Tanaka family's apartment seemed to follow exactly the same principle in physical form.
The same room changed functions repeatedly throughout the day, depending on immediate household needs. In the morning,
During the afternoon, it became Yuki's study area where she completed assignments from school.
Later that night, I witnessed something that completely changed how I thought about residential design.
Inside were neatly folded futons stacked carefully in a way that maximized every available centimeter. The transformation happened so quickly that it almost felt like watching a stage performance.
Suddenly, the room returned to being an open living space, ready for another productive day. Back in Germany, many rooms remain dedicated to single purposes regardless of actual usage patterns. A bedroom occupies space 24 hours daily.
Nobody reminded her. Nobody supervised her. Nobody praised her afterward for completing what seemed like a routine household responsibility.
The behavior appeared completely natural because it had become part of her everyday habits. Later, I asked Tanaka how he had taught such strong...
We didn't teach her through instructions. She learned by watching us every day.
In the Tanaka household, organization wasn't an activity performed occasionally before guests arrived unexpectedly.
After returning home, I started paying closer attention to my own habits and routines. I quickly realized that clutter...
Instead, clutter accumulated through dozens of small actions repeated automatically throughout ordinary days.
The Japanese approach attacked clutter long before it had any opportunity to accumulate significantly. Inspired by what I had observed, I began making gradual changes within my own apartment. First, I removed possessions that I hadn't used during the previous 12 months. Then I stopped purchasing items simply because they were discounted or temporarily attractive. Before buying anything new, I forced myself to answer one important question honestly. Where exactly will this item live inside my apartment? If I couldn't answer that question immediately, I chose not to make the purchase. The results surprised me more than I expected during those early experiments with minimalism. My apartment didn't become larger physically. The floors became visible. The surfaces became clearer. The atmosphere became calmer. Most importantly, my actions. I spent less time searching for misplaced belongings and less time cleaning unnecessary possessions. Years passed, and many of those habits remained with me throughout my entire time in Japan. Today, I live back in Germany. Yet the lessons I learned from the Tanaka family continue influencing my daily decisions even now. I still appreciate empty spaces.
And I still remember standing inside that small apartment, feeling amazed by its peaceful atmosphere. Because the truth...
It has very little to do with folding techniques, expensive furniture, or perfectly designed closets. The real secret is a different way of thinking about possessions, space, and... And they understand that a peaceful home begins long before cleaning actually becomes necessary. The lesson changed the way... In our next episode, I'll tell you about something that confused me even more than tiny apartments. It happened during a rainy morning.
As a German newcomer, I found the entire situation absolutely fascinating and almost impossible to understand. That will be the story of our next episode. Thank you for joining me once again, and I'll see you in the next chapter.